All right, and we are live. Welcome, everyone, to episode 28 of Narrations and Lamentations with Mittierim and the Boys. I am your host, Mittierim. With me tonight, we only have one of the boys. We have Michael with us, but filling in valiantly, we have our honorary boy, Vince Venturella. Vince, how you doing tonight?
Fantastic, sir. Always happy to be here. Happy to be an honorary boy.
Well, we very much appreciate you pitching in for yet another round where we are out of poor Skip, but it's actually not his family this time. It's actually him. He's feeling rather under the weather, so he will not be joining us tonight. So let's go ahead and kind of open up the floor with what we've been working on hobby-wise, just kind of to get the conversation going. Anybody working on anything fun they want to start off with?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. It's nights and nights and more nights. I often feel, if anybody remembers the cartoon show from the late 80s called King Arthur and the Knights of Justice, which was an awesome show, by the way. Awesomely terrible, but it's fantastic. It's about a modern football team that goes back and becomes King Arthur and the Knights of Camelot. Oh, yeah. And they have a chant in there that just says, Knights, 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 Knights. And that's all I hear in my head all day as I'm just painting night after night after night. So there you go.
Oh, that's pretty funny. What about you, Michael? Or should I guess?
Well,
or
similar to Vince, I have a chant going in my head, and it's stick the paintbrush in your eye. Stick the paintbrush in your eye. I don't have to paint any more damn dwarves. I'm down to 6 of them, but it's crippling. I don't want to touch them anymore.
You got what, a day and a half?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they'll be done. It's just I'm so tired of painting.
The Army Painter Metallic Silver Primer would have really saved you a lot of time, I'm suspecting, at the beginning of this project.
Yeah, it would have. I made a mistake.
Well, he still may get use out of it, because we were discussing last night. We actually had all the guys over for a painting night, and we kind of sit around the kitchen table and work on our stuff together and just bullshit. And he still needs to come up with a display board. So I came up with two options. Either he could go the traditional way and just get like a round piece of cardboard, spray paint it silver, and make it look like a dwarf shield for them to sit on. Or, given all of the stuff from End Times, he could just make a big graveyard.
Nice. Sure. Absolutely. I mean, if you got a big piece of terrain, you can always do that too. If you just if you just have like a big mountain or something, you just set that on the corner of a big piece of cardboard and put all the dwarves in front of that.
Yeah. Right now, Alicia's in the other room carving furiously to finish my display board. So
nice. Now, did you get your bases done?
Yes.
Awesome.
They're all done, and I'll admit, in open court, they don't look terrible.
I'll take it. I'll take it. That's as close to a victory as I'm ever going to get, and I accept.
Well, I don't know. I'm sliding in that direction. We'll have to see. Like I said, I'm not willing to pass judgment yet until I see an entire army of mine done.
Sure.
So when I finish my lizard, then I'll take a look at the whole thing and I'll decide whether the basing thing is really what I want to do. So speaking of which,
I was gonna say, how's that going?
Well, last night during our painting session, I finished up my second 10-man skink skirmishers unit. So that means I've painted a full box of skinks, a full box of Saurus, all of my characters except the Slon, which I'm not going to need immediately, and my first of 2 salamanders. So I think my next project is going to be, I finally did decide between Rippers and Pterodons, and I'm going to go with Ripperdactyls. So That's, I think, next on the plate.
You have chosen wisely.
Matter of fact, I think so. I think with so much shooting in the Army, I need something that might be able to go toe-to-toe with some combat unit. And frogging people and beating them to death with frenzied ripperdactyls sounds like a good idea.
Also, you can say I slam into them with my Ripper Dipper Doos. And Reef will be happy every time he hears that.
Right. I don't know if I have the charisma to pull that off. In other news, I have also I had a little bit of a mental break today after reading all of the spoiled information about the new Archeon book. And some of you who are on the Warhammer YouTubers page may have seen this, but in the moment of lunacy after I completely snapped, I had the idea for sort of a spoof series of End Times-esque books where basically the forces of order get to give it back just as good as they got it, and I'm calling it Warhammer the Happy Times. Right now it's kind of a spoof, but we were talking before we went on the air that if we decide to stay 8th edition after 9th drops, it may be something to blow up into actual scenarios.
I think you should call it. I think you should call it Warhammer: The End Times 2: The Beginning in Zur.
All right, I will accept. I will accept thoughts for other names. As I have to do that, I'm pretty terrible at naming things. I mean, that's why we ended up being Narrations and Lamentations with Mittierim and the boys. That was all Lord Tremendous's doing.
It's a good name, and it results in hilarious other videos when you watch it on YouTube. Like the other things on the side that it's telling me to link to are always truly hilarious.
Yeah.
So, I want to watch some stuff about the Bhagavad Gita. There's a lot of good links over there. So it's funny. It nailed both of my interests.
I find YouTube's suggestions on a lot of my stuff to be fairly amusing. So I did want to address, before we get into the meat of our topic for tonight, I do want to address a little bit of a controversy that the channel went through since last week. Apparently, there are a lot more of you Beastmen fans out there than I expected. I spent most of the week dealing with very upset Ungor fans out there. Even though I think we did give a certain amount of good positive feedback and some good ideas, there were some folks who were, let's say, displeased at the lackadaisical and somewhat goofy take that we took on the Beastmen. So to that, I would like to apologize on behalf of all animal lovers out there, and make this offer. If anyone feels like we have egregiously erred in coverage of the good and true Beastmen, get in contact with me. Leave a comment below, what have you. I would love to have somebody who is a more current Beastman player, who is one of those folks who were happy to tear me up in the comments or other interactions. Come on and do it. I would very much like to give everyone a chance to have their say and to kind of spread love of the Beastmen. So, that being said, if you do wish to be a part of any sort of rebuttal show, leave a comment below and we'll work on something. So, that being said, let's move on to tonight's topic, which I'm sure is going to continue my downward slide in terms of in terms of subscribers. The End Times. Now, I would like to preface this slightly to kind of give you an idea of the type of show you're about to watch before you guys go down voting and giving me bad comments. I think we have gone to great lengths to explain our general, at least for Mittierim and Du Bois, Vince is more positive in this, but to express our general distaste for the narration and the general storyline of the End Times. So, that being old ground, I see no need to retread it at this time. So, what we're going to be discussing is the mechanics and the scenarios and the rules of the end times, and what we feel are the strongest points for someone who is not interested in following the end times narrative, but rather incorporating those rules into their own games. So I think that's more of a generally interesting topic anyway. So, that being the case, the first question I want to put to our panel, we're not going to go and like number the the books like we do with the Army books. We'll get right into the questions. Right now we are going to focus on Nagash and Glottkin. We are going to do a show for the other books as we get them, so just keep that in mind. So first question, guys. Glottkin and Nagash bring a lot of changes in terms of army compositions, different ideas for running games, I mean, new spells in both books. What do you guys see as the most valuable sort of new rule or new idea to come out of those books for use in just home games?
If I could go first. So Nagash was a huge game changer for me, just in one very simple thing, that if you are a Tomb Kings or a VC player, right, suddenly you had this Undead Legion thing at your disposal. And I think that Undead Legions is, you say whatever you will for all the legions that came later, and that can be a different discussion. But Undead Legions was a great thing. It took Tomb Kings, who really had some very crippling deficiencies. And this comes from a guy who has a lot of them and has played them since the day they were made and loves the army regardless of what it was. But it took that and made them more fun to play. It reinvigorated my love of the army. I modeled a bunch more. I picked up more units. I put them on the table, and I had a just absolute blast doing it. Had nothing to do with the end times or anything like that. It just gave me a new way to play my army that I already loved, and then I now got to have a new set of experiences with. So I think that was very positive.
Well said. Michael, what do you think?
Biggest game changer for me is probably the 50% Lords and Heroes. Simply because being able to go, you know what? When I normally couldn't take 5 Thanes in a unit, I can do that now.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's probably going to be terrible, but...
Well, let's actually dwell on that a little bit. I remember very vividly, and this was probably the one bit of controversy about the end times that I don't remember jumping in for or against. I don't think I really gave a crap because I was mad at so many other things. But there was generally a feeling that the 50% Lords and Heroes change was going to ruin Warhammer, and it was going to turn it into Hero Hammer, and that there would be just this total unbalancing of the game. Do you guys think that was a founded idea, or has it been pretty much debunked by play since the release of Nagash?
I think it was an understandable reaction to it, because you look at it and go, oh, look at all these demon princes and things people can take. And then people forget that cannons exist. And taking 50% worth of heroes and characters left you no core. And so you just ended up not having the models to finish it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I would say 2 things to it. One, no. The short answer, no, the idea is completely unfounded. It didn't ruin the game in any way, nor really could it, for 2 reasons. One, the rules just don't allow for it. As Michael said, I mean, the reality is the game isn't old Hero Hammer. That's not a thing. There are Steadfast and Step Up and all 100 other rules, cannons that don't guess anymore, and everything else in the world that makes heroes that are just standing around a liability. Now, of course, there's still a problem of fronting units with just crap tons of heroes. So it did lead to some other issues, certainly. But at the same time, consider the 2 worlds of play. Right, so that number 1, there's other rules that stop it from really being a problem. And number 2, what are the actual 2 worlds of play? Friendly games and tournament games, right? In friendly games, talk to your friends. Don't be a D.
Don't be
right?
a douche.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, perfect. I mean, if you're playing with your friends, I would assume you're all friends, and so should act like friends. I don't know. It seems kind of like a pretty base assumptions. So like, find what's comfortable for you and your friends, and then 2, at a tournament, that's going to be like, tournaments have comp or something like that, or they don't, and you know that, so you bring the filth, right? Like, the point is, at tournaments, expectations are set. Either it's wide open and bring the filth and deal with it, and that's what this weekend is all about. It's about filthy, filthy, filthy demons trying to get up and just rub their filthiness all over you, or it's about a comp list that you've got to build to that corrects for the game's deficiencies, just like it does in 100 other ways pre 50% Lords of Mittierim.
Mm-hmm. I actually think, I mean, purely from a narrative casual player, I love the idea of the 50% Lords and Heroes. I don't know that I can say that I've ever maxed it out, but now I can fit in the characters that I want to fit in. I mean, I have, from day one, been fielding with my ogres a Tyrant and a Slaughtermaster, just because that's how my ogre tribe is put together. And to not have to sacrifice gearing them up to be able to do that, I was all over it. I've through play, that particular rule has won me over.
I agree. Actually, let me also say, it let me make a bunch of bad choices, which led to more fun, right? Because I'm like throwing people on monsters, and like, I know they're gonna get shot down or be less effective, but I don't care. It's way more fun. Like, yes, I can fit these guys on monsters now, and it's exciting.
Yeah. You're in the wrong place to have anybody talk down about putting people on monsters. You did watch my whole run with Warriors of Chaos and the Manticore Lord, didn't you?
Absolutely. I supported that fully. And the Slaughter Brute to boot.
Yes. Well, it's like bookends. I couldn't have one without the other. It would be impolite. And God knows we can't have impolite Chaos Warriors. So I'm going to actually answer something probably a little more unusual to this first question. I think the thing that stuck with me, and I think is going to be most useful in the long term that was in the Nagash book, for at least for narrative play, are the underground fighting rules. I love those. I mean, we've played several games with them, and sometimes they've been a pain in the royal butt, and other times they've been a lot of fun. But the idea of, having some concrete rules to go, okay, well, now you're fighting in the under tunnels and stuff, it really has expanded what we have done in the narrative because of that. And I think, I like seeing more and more of that.
That's a good call out, and I think you're exactly right. Those kind of like alternate settings and scenarios, it just makes the game different and more interesting, right? So yeah, I'm totally in with that. It's a great choice.
Yeah. Okay. So, flip-flop. Of what we've seen in Glottkin and Nagash, what do you guys have you looked at and just went, this is garbage, I never want to deal with this? Or even if there's nothing that kind of invokes that kind of reaction, what do you think was the biggest miss of the new stuff that was presented in those books?
Well, I don't know if it's a miss, but I would say the most limited use is like Nagash and the Glottkin themselves, right? Because they're cool, they're beautiful models. It's not that, and I don't even mind playing against them once in a while, right? But it's like Lord Tremendous just put up that battle report that was like 24,000 points, right? That's really cool. If that was your every game, you'd kill yourself, right? And that's Nagash, right? Like, yeah, he's okay to fight once in a while as a neat part of a narrative or something really cool going on, an unusual scenario, but he's a really expensive model for something that you really hope you're only staring down once every couple of months at most.
Yeah. I'll actually bring you seem to like bringing in the D&D references, and I had this thought the other day. Nagash and the other models remind me of the Tarask from the second edition monster manual. Yeah. It's like this awesome, just gigantic, world-destroying monster, for those who don't know, that's almost impossible to kill. But it's one of those things that, like, I think every player I knew wanted to fit once, even if you got the crap stomped out of you, just because of it was the biggest bad. but nobody wanted that second game with it.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. The Trask is the perfect example because it's something you build a campaign around to prevent its awakening, right? Only to like fail at the end of the campaign and have it wake up and then have this climactic final battle. It has a reason. It's like this super villain arch level thing that just doesn't belong in your normal course of play.
Mm-hmm. So what about you, Michael? What has been your biggest miss?
It's not so much a miss, but I'm not a big fan of the undeath lore. As I feel like they didn't do what it should have done. Instead of it should have been here I'm bringing up more and more and more undead, and instead it became here I'm bringing up chaff and chaff and chaff, and that's all the spell really does now.
I can see that, but though I don't know, I might like the more I've thought about that lore, the more I think it's a great opportunity for use for other things. Like, I think depending upon the narrative you want to run, it would be very easy to change that lore to operate as like a general summoning lore. All you have to do is basically erase the mention of undead and put in whatever army you want to be summoning. And it gives it's I think it's potentially more useful than that in a narrative sense. Now, I absolutely agree, and I think this weekend at Brawlers we are going to get beat in the head with it.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think it's a good lore for competitive play because of that, because it basically just absolutely jacks over how you can build your list, because you can essentially rely on the magic to give you what you otherwise would have had to spend points on. And particularly with the whole idea that you don't get any points for killing any of the summoned crap,
Yeah.
it's very scary. My wife has
Yeah, it's
shed
definitely a
blood
tricky
for my
one.
deployment for my display table. She's bandaging herself up. Go ahead, Vince. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you're fine. You're fine. I was just gonna say, yeah. I mean, I think it's tough because on one hand, it's a fairly weak lore. Like when you look at everything that's not a summoning spell, it's utter garbage. So, like 3 of the spells in the list are just literally terrible. But the summoning itself. Go ahead. What's that?
I was just going to say you can pretty much argue that with just about any one of the lores. I mean, show me a lore that's got 6 amazing spells. You're
I
looking
didn't
at
say amazing. I'm looking for average. And I think a lot of the book lores could meet that bar. Okay. They could meet the bar of like 1 terrible maybe, and then like average and 1 and really good. But with Undeath, those it's 3 that are just garbage. Like I would burn those cards if I drew them. Like whatever, I'm never going to use this. You fold them up, you put them off to the side of the board, you keep the summoning ones. It's like the rest of these are non-cards. They might as well be an ace of spades for all they're going to do for you in the game. Okay? Like, that is equally useful. A Pokemon card would do you more good, because at least it'd be, like, reflective and you can look at a funny picture while you're playing. Than freaking, like, Hand of Dust or something. But I think with the summoning, it's tough, because, like, full points, I mean, you couldn't do that, or the lore gets too touchy. Half points, it's complicated to remember. There's a lot of problems with it. Summoning is always innately powerful because it's always a force multiplier. Plus, there's the annoyance of, like, trucking around a second army. You know what I mean? Like, you've got to... So it's just... It's one of those things that's, like, a good idea, but it's got so much baggage with it, right? And I think it does, in the end, probably come out on the losing side of that. There's a lot of good, but I think there's just slightly more bad.
You know, thinking about that, I think what hits me the worst with it is not the fact that of what it does. I think it's the fact that the undead kind of spells that allow them to keep bringing units and buffing their own units, giving it to, say, Warriors of Chaos, and they just go, look, I'm crapping out chaff that I don't have to pay for, so I can max out on the rest of my army.
Yeah,
Kind of
I
what
thought
breaks
the
my heart.
weirdest thing was that they made it available to everybody. Like that. Like, I think if they had kept it like a Lore of Undeath thing, or a Lore of Vampire Counts Tomb King's Legion of Undeath thing, and basically said that for your Hierophant and your Vampire General, you can either take your race lore or Undeath and have that be sort of your sustaining lore, that would be one thing. But it's weird. I mean, from what I've seen of the Brawlers lists, there's going to be a bunch of, like, level 2 Goblin Shamans running around with Lore of Undeath. Because the Night Goblins get that bump up from the mushroom. And it's like, thematically, it doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense. It just, yeah.
Yeah.
But, like I said, I think there's option. Like, I almost would have liked it if the thing that you summoned had to be a single model. Like, you can't summon infantry, but you could summon some of the stuff, like, from the vampire counts, like Banshees, Cairn Wraiths, Vargulfs, like, monsters. And I know there's several kind of badass Tomb Kings models that you could do with that too, just individual little models and make it kind of like a, we're going to summon our big nasty and unleash him upon the enemy. I think that could have been very interesting, but I don't think anybody uses it that way.
Yeah, surprisingly, despite how good the kitty seems in Lord T's reports, I don't think people are using Lore of Undeath to summon very many War Sphinxes onto the table.
Right, and that's sad, because, I mean, if you go back and look at, like, fantasy, like, you do your big summoning rituals, and you summon giant, terrible monsters, and they throw down, it's like, that's kind of what I would like to see represented with that on the field. And I
As
think it's
opposed to,
sad
like, summoning 10 guys.
yeah. There's just a lack of an oomph factor there that I guess bugs me.
Behold my power, these 10 dudes. Look at 'em, guys.
Right. So the thing, again, I'm going to kind of go with this side stuff. The thing that was the most disappointing to me in the Glottkin was the city battling rules. I just don't think they work very well with a ranked infantry game. There's cool ideas if it was Mordheim or more skirmish style, but try to fit a rank of anything in an alleyway in any sort of significant terrain setup, and you basically just can't use those rules with the way the game works. So I thought that was kind of a bad fail across the board.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that you're right. I think city games like Mordheim, that was already very successful in that space. And I think that Warhammer has, it's funny, we just talked about this on Warhammer Weekly, like Warhammer has a very complicated movement base. And that's fine, it's a feature of the game, it's not good or bad, it's both. But I think that it is complicated enough that when you also then bring in like a city's worth of terrain, it just becomes untenable, right? The two things don't mesh well together. If you're going to play in like cities, you need a relatively simple movement and line of sight system and stuff like that.
Right. So, excuse me. So, here's sort of the next question for those two books. Pretending you are writing them as they come out, and we don't know sort of what's happened in the following books that have come out. If you guys were going to change or eliminate, I guess you could just strike something out, of either of those two books in the name of either fun or balance, however you want to call it, what would that be? What would your changes be?
That's a good question. Is it just eliminate? Is that what you mean? Like,
No, you can change or eliminate.
Okay, got it. I think I would change the Morghast, Erichai or Arakai or whatever, the fallen angel things.
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like they're not interesting at where they're at because they're so expensive for a couple models. They're beautiful, but they don't really have a home in either of the undead armies that they can be played in. And it's a shame because they're so fantastic and gorgeous models. I would have made them like a little worse stats and a little cheaper, so that maybe they could fit in there or something like that. You know, just they're too much for what they are. And I don't see them on the table because both armies already had better choices in all of the slots where you could take them.
Mm-hmm. Well, if we're going to talk about specifically models, the one thing I would have liked to have seen was some sort of combined-looking unit, like in service to Nagash, for the undead. Something that might combine sort of the look, definitely a new kit to replace some of the kind of super expensive, like the Blood Knights are ungodly expensive, that sort of thing. Just give something with sort of a new look, so it didn't really to kind of act as the glue in the Legion force. So it didn't look so obvious, like you're just stealing units from two different things and cramming them together.
I like it. I would like to clarify my answer. I would make the Morghasts more like Ushabti. Boom. They'd be better Ushabti, but cost it appropriately. There you go.
Between you and Skip, I have heard far too much about Ushabti lately.
Look, somebody's got to get it out there on the internet.
What about you, Michael?
Model-wise, I hate Nagash's model. That's just... Why? Why do you go from normal-sized dude to gigantic, towering dude? After you devour a dwarven god, how do you become taller?
Because they're following the Power Rangers rule of cool. In the second half of the show, they always got super big, and then you had to combine your Zords together, right?
Got a point there.
I don't know. I'm borrowing words. I never watched Power Rangers when I was a kid. I was a little too old for that, but...
It doesn't make no sense to me.
My wife is apparently giving me the rundown of exactly how it works in the other room.
Yeah. I mean, I will admit, I'm a sucker for that. I actually am going to try to kit bash my own Nagash together pretty soon as a modeling challenge, but I do love the existing model. At the same time, I also really loved when he got lit on fire by Deathly Death. So, you know, they're both good.
Yeah. See, that's my big... And I will kind of extend this talk into the other books because it's my show and I get to do that. I feel very disappointed that there is not a single one of the models that came out for the end times that I could give a crap about. I don't know if it was just the weird change in the aesthetic or the fact that none of them are armies that I'm really passionate about, but it's like I look at all of the models that come out and I'm just like, eh. The only one that I even for a moment considered was the smaller monsters came out with Glottkin.
Mm-hmm.
And the only reason I was considering that is that at the time I didn't have a great unclean one for my demon army. And so I was like, well, maybe I'll pick that up, leave the dude off the back of it, and just turn it into some monstrous great unclean one or something. But that even didn't go very far because the cost, I think, was prohibitive.
I will say those are really good skulls. Like that my buddy has one and built a Bloab Rot Spawn or whatever his name is, but it's a beautiful sculpt. I mean, it is a really fantastic model, even though it's Nurgle and absolutely disgusting to its core, but as it should be.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, certainly I have the opposite perspective. It's been a cornucopia of riches for me as far as models. I mean, I have a sneaking suspicion of why the other side didn't get any models. And that's because all of your models are coming in, countdown X number of months. And by you, I mean the good guys.
Right. Except for those of us who aren't going to get a new army, like Bretonia and Ogres. And half of the other guys you're talking about is good guys. And dwarves.
I think I prefaced that with
like
you weren't going to be happy.
We're not getting into that negativity. Hey, you got to admit, I have shown a remarkable level of control up to this point. We're 34 minutes in, and I haven't gone on a cursing tirade yet, so...
It's pretty good. You're doing well.
So, as far as... So, we talked a little bit about the models, but is there anything rules-wise you guys think could have been done differently, or something that you might change to get it a little more to what you were wanting or expecting?
Hmm.
I mean, rules-wise, I think to me, we already called out a couple. Like Lore of Undeath could have been a little better rules-wise. I agree with your city fighting. It could have been a little better rules-wise. I don't know what that looks like, but something
Hmm.
better. And then all of the like the Blight Kings, and again, they fall in much the same range. Like the Blight Kings, the way that they were sort of arrayed and costed, they're kind of cool for like one army, which is demons, so they can get non-magical attacks. But other than that, again, they just don't have a home, and it's a shame because they're really cool models. It's just I felt like I wish they would have taken the broader rules picture into concern when they made those models and made sure they were making something that was actually a necessary component.
Hmm. Yeah, I can see that. I think a lot of what they made for these releases, you definitely can already feel the shelf life kind of going on. Like when they first showed up, it's like, yeah, these are going to be maybe useful for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
I think my biggest sort of overarching change was I would have gone a little lighter on the Legion of Undeath, or not Legion of Undeath, the Legion of Chaos. Where I think one of their armies, Beastmen, obviously needed some pump up, and the ability to get marks and roll on the Eye of the Gods tables for their characters was very good. Um, the idea that the change to the Reign of Chaos table basically meant that there was 1 out of 12 bad results for the demons, I think was a little much. I was not a super huge fan of making them either like the undead in terms of their crumble, or if your god is ascendant, just unbreakable.
Yeah.
I just think they kind of went a little overkill on that, and maybe toning it down a little bit again could extend the shelf life of that particular rule set.
Well, it's funny as a demons player, as like I said, so I have a Tomb King's army and I have a demons army, and as a Tomb King's player, I haven't made a Tomb King's army since the day Nagash came out. Like literally that day, I was like, Undead Legions forever. Like I can print a Tomb King's army, erase Tomb Kings, and write Undead Legions. I haven't changed a unit, but now I don't crumble and I don't need a Hierophant, and I can march. Finally, we can do all the things that vampire counts could always do. Those cheaters. Um, and and so that was all upside to me. It was all good. But so with the Chaos Legion rules, from a mono demon player who had no real interest of expanding my army because it's very fluffy and thematic and mono each god, there was no value to me there. I didn't think like, hey, let me bring in some of this other stuff, and I was certainly not interested in becoming unstable. A 3-point zombie blowing up because you lose combat res, that's fine. A 11-point or a Daemonette or even more expensive Bloodletter or Plaguebearer blowing up. No, no, thank you. Pass.
Yeah. Well, and I think they could have done it too. I mean, like I don't like the idea if you want to get those little buffs for the Beastmen, now all of a sudden you're replace. It's just, I mean, I don't know. I definitely think the idea of giving the Beastmen the marks was solid and necessary. Due to personal beatdown from it, they can just ambush whatever the hell they want now, but without having to pay those double units. But
Yeah, I mean they
I'll
got
give
the
them a
best
bone. They
changes
needed
in that
something.
book, and I love the Beastman changes in Glottkin. I love them with marks. I love the idea of modeling a Beastman army with those marks all over them. There's like I don't remember who it is, but somebody has a custom Nurgle Beastman army that's all gross and stuff other than the
Mm-hmm.
battle reports, and I love that army. He has like the big slugs as his Pumbagors and such.
Yep.
And God, the thematic, being able to take that and do that is just beautiful. So I'm all about that, both from a rules wise and a hobbyist perspective. So I think they're all
Yeah.
like I love all those changes.
Like I would love the idea of doing a whole Beastman army like Skethis. Like go Mark of Zinch and just play up the bird side of things.
Does somewhere a few tables away there have to be another table of like with an army that's solely composed of the good guy beastmen, that when one of them dies, you've got to remove one of your models?
Yes, why not?
Okay. Just making sure that the balance is preserved there, Dark Crystal style.
Right. That's all right. We've been proven that Warhammer does not give two shits about balance. So here's the other thing. With the sort of the big difference, I think, between Glottkin and Nagash, is that in Glottkin we also got our sort of first of the mega sort of good guy characters in Karl Franz Ascendant. I guess, what do you think of him and his sort of game? Because I've seen more battle reports with him in them than just about any other character. And two, do you not to have included some sort of mega opponent for the other side?
I love Karl Franz Ascendant. I think he's awesome. I think it's a cool, badass, martial dude. I think you see him more because there is a difference between 810 points and 1,000, right? I mean, like there is just a legitimate difference between those two numbers. I mean, I'm not to be tediously obvious,
Right.
but like, I mean, in meaning there is a real difference there. And, you know, I mean, he's cool. He's a cool good guy. I mean, he's Shazam. He throws thunderbolts around. He's scary. He's got the essence of Gul Maraz. Like, I've loved Karl Franz from the moment I first read about him. You know, like, he's cool. Again, I still place him in the same category as, like, Nagash and Glottkin of, would I want to fight against him every game? No, but, like, if somebody wants to bring him, that's fine. Like, just tell me. Okay, cool. And, you know, I'm good with that. As long as it's not every week, I'm fine.
Any thoughts from you on that, Mike?
I'm definitely a big fan of Karl Franz. We got a good guy that actually does stuff. I'm a fan of that.
Most of the. I was just gonna say, you know, in a lot of the books, you got other guys, you got other good guys, like you had Volton and stuff as well, right? The problem is that you didn't get the minis, and you didn't often, exempting Karl Franz, you didn't often get them on monsters. The good guys often were like riding horses or on foot, and the bad guys got these big, sweet, you know, monster things they got to ride around. So that just makes them innately cooler.
Well, I think ultimately there was a big difference in scale, both in sort of literally in the size of the models, but just, I mean, yeah, Volton's cool, but you put Volton up against Nagash, nobody's going to put money on that fight.
Right.
I mean, and I guess that's part of my whole feeling with both of these books, and with the Endheims total. And I know you chided me on this before, Vince, but for a game that theoretically is supposed to be able to tell whatever martial-based story that you want to with whatever armies, I just think this whole thing is way too one-sided to be acceptable. And maybe the whole beginning of Ninth will be super heavy loaded on the good guys, but I'm almost more nervous for that now that they've sort of white-slated it. Because the good guys that it may be super heavy on may end up being unrecognizable to what we're playing now. And so I almost wish that the releases had come sort of with support for both sides in Nagash and in Glottkin, in terms of sort of the same level of scale. So you could at least feel like you're sort of participating rather than being the whipping boy of the series.
I think that's fair, and I will say that, like, as I said, I think the business reason behind it is, I think ultimately the story paid the bottom line here, right? Like, they knew they have releases coming for the new good guy armies in 9th edition. They're not gonna, they can't, it takes a lot of money to make a sculpt and print, you know, thousands of copies of a model. And so they did what they did with what they could. My guess is, if I'm the writer of that story, you know, it makes me think back to, like, Larry Hama, you know, a great comic book writer writing in the 80s, who was writing G.I. Joe and did a fantastic job on that book, but was basically forced, you know, by the toy company to say, like, hey, we made this new toy. It's a flying shark helicopter boat. You've got to write it into your story, right? And so, like, Larry Hama, who's a great writer, had to find a way to shove the flying shark helicopter boat into the story, regardless of whether he wanted to or not, right? So
Well,
ultimately, the story has to pay the bottom line here.
well, I personally think we have room for a flying shark helicopter boat. I mean, the dwarves didn't get anything. Give that to them. It sounds right down their alley.
No, 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 no. To be fair, we got Ungram, who's the same model that you can't buy anywhere that we've had since like 5th or 6th edition.
Well, we are getting a little ahead of ourselves with that one, but no, yeah. I mean, that was my whole joke when I was talking about the happy times, is that the mid book doesn't get any models because no one likes the Chaos Dwarves.
That's not a real army, right?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I agree with you completely. In theory, like in an ideal world, 100% you're correct. I would have loved to see more good guy models, more good guys on monsters, more of those sweet things. Like, heck yeah, man, bring it on. But that's just because, why wouldn't you want that? That would have been fantastic. I just think ultimately this is probably like where, the real world crashed in and ruined part of it.
Right. Real world always getting in the way of shit.
Reality get in the way of my fantasy. It's ridiculous.
I know, Jesus. Um, so apparently, like, we have viewers, but apparently we have said nothing that is interesting to them whatsoever, because we have not gotten a single comment all show, and we're almost an hour in at this point. So we actually have more viewers than we usually get, which is a little weird that we're not getting any comments. But if there are any of you who are out there and you're not like Google ad bots, feel free to leave questions or comments or anything. We promise we won't make fun of you much.
Are you sure it's not a case where like the comments didn't load or something?
It might be. I've been sitting here refreshing like a crazy man, and I've gotten nothing except for. There we go. So Dark CT, see, they must have just not been putting, because Dark CT just commented one 5 seconds ago that talks about the flying shark helicopter boat, and we just got to there.
Nice.
Yeah. He says, frankly, he's entirely burned, like a chaos dwarf with his head stuck in a forge. I don't know if I can impart anything other than we need more kabooms. Okay, let's actually talk about that. And again, we're going to expand it a little bit. The energy level that has gone through the community during this. I think it's like when Nagash first came out. Yeah, there was a lot of people who were negative to it and immediately responded with the, hey, it's not going to be a real part of the game. I mean, heck, I was on that side for a bit. But there generally seemed to be excitement. Maybe I'm reading my.
I think that's about half right. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I'm reading my own feelings into it, but it definitely seems that excitement level has gone down with each subsequent release, and now we're kind of at just this terror and just drained, or as Dark CT put it, just burned by it. What do you guys think about that? Is that just me being a negative Nancy, or are we definitely seeing it having a different?
No, you're right. I mean, although the dwarves kind of got their teeth kicked in Nagash, it was still cool to see. Hey, the story is being propelled forward. There's stuff going on. There's involvement. And I felt like, okay, the next book should be good. We'll get a nice clash, and then book after book, it just seems to be more disappointment. That they just missed the margin by a little bit.
I think to me this should have been a trilogy, not 5 books. I think that's where it is. That's where I'm going to come down. I feel like 5 books was just too many. You can only watch The Empire Strikes Back so many times, right? I've made that reference before, and I really stand behind it. Like, you can take one sad movie, but like if I go watch Schindler's List, I don't want to follow that up and watch Schindler's List 4 more times right after it. Like, there's only so much I can take. And I think that's just generally what happens. Like, they're all fairly downer stories. I mean, Kane has some brighter spots to it. It's probably the happiest of all the books. I mean, unless you're a psychotic Skaven player like me who delights with Glee at book 4, but that's certainly not a happy book. So I think that, yeah, I think that's fair. I think it's just, it was too much repeated sadness. I think eventually that wears people down.
I agree.
I think
if they had killed, I think if they had killed Glottkin and Thanquol, I wouldn't be nearly as down on it as I did. Just completely leave those out.
And even as a Skaven player, I think you're right. I think those are the 2 unnecessary books, right? Like, I love my Skaven. I love their story. I think that's a really fun book to read. But honestly, you could have done that in a novel, or you could have done it in a chapter of one of the other books.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, I hate to say it, but it is true. I think if you would have went like Nagash, Kane, Archeon, those are the big beats of the story, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the other 2, they just don't resonate as much.
Yeah.
So I feel like it was a little stretched out.
I would even say, if you're going to go with 5 books, make the other 2 counter beats. Don't focus on... I mean, give us Nagash beating people down, but then give us a book on the dwarves or on one of the races of Order kind of trying to hold shit together from their end. And give them some wins. I mean, even if you're going to ultimately pull the rug out from under them and say, just, you know what, this is the end of everything, you need that story to be more personal, so it's not just this kind of repetitive... just beating us. And, I mean, alternate the beats a little bit, and then you can still have your ultimately evil wins story if that's where you want to go with it, but then I think it has a more emotional resonance at that point because you've come to know more of these characters and these races with those counter beat books.
Well, worst case scenario there, they were destroying the world anyways. They knew they were, so what was the point of all the beating?
Pure sadism.
I think that I think that what killed it was that every book is basically named after like a person, and like, what are you going to call the good guy book about Bretonia? Giels? That's not selling any books. The Empire? Carl? You're just going to have a book named Carl? That's not working, right?
No,
So I mean, it's just
Emperor Shazam. That book will sell. I guarantee you.
The dwarf book could be called Thogrum.
Yeah.
No, I'm not buying that one. The dwarves are the only one who get a pass for, like, yeah, they could have a couple good names, but that's
well,
it.
You know what? The dwarves, you go with the last name, Grudge Bearer.
Yeah.
That would be one hell of a book name.
That's pretty good. I'll give you that one. All right, the dwarves get a book because they've got a good name.
If they did that kind of book, they can make it look like a book of grudges.
Right.
You're even doing the marketing for them. I like it.
See? Yeah. That's it. We've got to do my series of adventures at some point.
All right. May I ask a quick question that's kind of a deviation, but may I ask a quick question?
Go right ahead.
Michael.
What's up?
9th edition happens. Okay, let's just imagine a world where 9th edition happens, and very early on, they publish a book of dwarven supplements to whatever faction dwarves belong in that effectively sort of recreate a dwarven army. And that book is like in the whatever faction book there is, there's like some dwarven units. And then there's a second book they publish just called Grudge Bearer that builds out the dwarves and now allows you to, within that faction, place something very akin to your current dwarven army. And it looks like you're describing. Do you go by that? Are you interested in that book?
I would basically get to play my dwarves in 9th.
Basically, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I
right.
definitely do that.
Okay. Fair enough. All right, G-Dub, heard it here. Make it happen. Grudge Bearer, 9th edition. Let's see it. Let's see it on the shelves.
Especially if it's called Grudge Bearer. I would definitely.
I think you won me over with that name. I'm with it now. Yeah, let's make it happen.
You're welcome. See, and I mean, you didn't ask me the question, but I would feel the same way with my ogres. If what I'm playing now is possible to go forward, I have less concern with going to 9th. I would go for those products. But Am I interested in a bunch of ogres that are basically giant fat savage orcs? Not in the least. Do I want to lose my lead builders? No. I mean, the idea of man-eaters being sort of these wandering groups of warriors that take on the cultures of those they work for, I mean, that's freaking amazing. If you lose that, you lose something fundamentally about the army. And I'm not interested in that. I picked up the ogres for what they are. And I'll stay in 8th before I give up that.
I'm the same way with the dwarves becoming a part of the empire. You know, yeah, we're allies, but I don't want my dwarves being, oh, well, you know what? You guys are really good at making cannons, so you're just going to do that all day.
Yeah. Now, I will say I can very easily see us, if what they say is true and the rules let you use the old army books, I very easily see us picking up a copy of the rule book and playing 9th edition rules, but staying with 8th edition armies and saying screw the new purchases after that point.
Oh, yeah.
But I think ultimately it'll depend on what that rule book looks like and how truly compatible it all ends up being.
And I imagine that's much the same for a lot of people. I'm betting you're not alone in that at all. I think that's probably a very common perspective, and I think a pretty fair one, too.
Mm-hmm. And one thing I did say, I think, who was I talking to? I think I was talking to Nicholas, it might have been Nicholas Belair on one of the comments, and he was talking about how he sees this as sort of a move towards bringing in that kind of 40k grimdark, just nobody's good kind of ideology. And I told him the same thing I'll say right now. If that's the feel they're going with, I'm out. I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
I've got no desire for that kind of just no hope fantasy game.
That's why I stopped playing 40k in the first place.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. It's always been one of the things that's bothered me about 40k. But I think on the bright side, that's all the rumors that we have seen so far say that that's definitely not where they are going. So, you know, that makes me happy at least. I see very little chance of that being the actual reality that comes to pass.
Yeah. So, all right, we've been going for about an hour now. We did a few questions, though, suspiciously fewer than we had if we hadn't had a certain person as our guest tonight. But we might, after we answer these, if we've got time left, we might just open the floor and let you ask us questions of your own devising.
Sure.
So, first one is from Kieran Dunleavy. He says, don't you feel that the legioning of armies helps the flexibility of your campaign? I see the ability to incorporate contingents of demons, vampires, etc. as a tool for embellishing the story without having to introduce a whole new player or race to the campaign mix. What are your thoughts on how to employ them? I've actually been thinking about, if neither of you have an immediate answer, I've got one to this one.
Go for it.
I definitely think that's a good way to look at it, but I actually say the reason why I don't think I would use the legioning rules for that purpose is we already have what I see as a better system for it. And that's the mercenary system that Triumph and Treachery introduced. I think you can do the same and sort of incorporate other contingents without necessarily having to bring in a bunch of extra rules. Because the mercenary system is very simple, it's very easy, and frankly, for a general narrative, that would probably be the way I would go before I would go with Undead Legion. And speaking to that, we're actually not using any of the Legion rules in our new campaign that we're going to be starting in the next couple months. We're going to go base armies, because I think it adds more than we want to deal with, and there's simpler ways to accomplish it.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I am of a different mindset, but that's only because of where I sit. Like, and that being the case, that like, am I interested in getting in the Grand Legion of the Everchosen, where I can throw all the Chaos and Skaven together into one army? No, at that point we're just getting pretty silly, right? Like, you know. But when it comes to like Undead Legion, like I said, I don't think I would ever play my TK as not TK or as not undead legions. Like I don't need vampire counts of units. I don't need to be taking anything out of that book. I just want that. I just want what BC has. Now that I've been to the Promised Land, I have tasted ambrosia. I have been to the mountaintop. I can't imagine you now taking that away from me. Like, hey, you know how if you just erased a word and wrote another word, you could then march and not crumble when your Hierophant gets, smacked into by 5 pieces of chaff that can easily kill a toughness 4 moron without armor? Yeah, well, welcome back to that crappy world and deal with that.
Right.
So that's, I have a very biased perspective in this.
Well, and I think you're looking at it from sort of a different purpose from where the question is answered. Put that to the side and think about in terms, like, let's say you weren't playing Tomb Kings, and the whole idea is you're trying to find a way to incorporate other races into a narrative without introducing new players or hold on armies. Do you feel that those rules can be used to that effect?
Yeah, certainly I see what you're saying there, and that's trickier. I think in that case, I think you're probably right that the mercenaries thing gives you a wider swath, right? Because you can really get at any of the other things, where the legions, regardless of what they are, they're pretty limited, right? You have to have either a TK or a VC, and then they're only going to bring in their counterpart, or whatever, right? Whereas with the mercenaries, it doesn't really matter what you've got. You can kind of get anything and bring anything to a point. Yeah.
Right.
So that's what I would say.
Yeah. Any thoughts from you, Michael?
Not even from a story level, but I think the reason that I don't much care for the Legioning is after the Vampire Count's Tomb King Legion, which was done very well, the rest of the legions didn't really need each other. The demons and the Warriors of Chaos, the combined Chaos thing, they already kind of have counterparts amongst themselves that no one's going to take if you take a legion of it. And then the whole, well, now your army is unstable, that hurts demons so much more than the whole, we lose combat and we roll dice and see what happens.
Though I have to say, I think maybe that's because I disagree with the way the legioning of the Chaos was. I actually think it would be cooler if it was like it used to be, where depending upon the type of general you took, certain choices in, like, let's say, for instance, you took a demon as your general. Then basically your demon stuff, you can use your demon stuff normally, but Warrior's Core becomes a special choice for you, and Warrior's Special becomes a rare, and you don't get access to rare choices. Yeah. And same thing with the Beastmen. And so it gives you kind of different ways to build your army without just being able to flat pick and choose the best things that you need to, which I think contributes to that ramp up in power level.
Yeah, agreed. I would have much rather seen, if you remember the 6th edition books, how they had those alternate army setups at the back of the book in many of them. Like the Empire had like the artillery train of Nuln, and like Skaven had like, the clans, so you could take a fully clan-spec'd army. I loved those to death. Still to this day, it's some of my favorite alt rule sets because it lets you just like, it lets you go change the building rules completely, but in this very unique, fluffy, thematic way of like, yes, I want to be a Clan Pestilence army. So I lose all these other toys, but I get to take what I want from Clan Pestilence finally. That kind of thing. It just lets you build really cool armies. And I feel like they could have gone that kind of direction using variable rules exactly like you're describing, right, for Chaos and Elves. And I think I would have been happier with that.
Yeah. Is that where like the Slayer army for the dwarves came from? Because I actually skipped 6th edition. I played in 5th, and then left and missed 6th and 7th, and came back for 8th.
Probably I did not ever. I'm not a dwarf player, and I never really read the dwarf book.
It was.
Okay, there you go.
Mm-hmm. They've spoken about it on the Brew House.
Yeah, I love that stuff, man. That was so cool. And like, it's funny because the Elvish lists that aren't the one that everybody uses, right? Like that aren't the Eternity host list, like the armies of Asterion and that kind of stuff. Those are almost closer to that idea, right? Where you had like Tyrion falling to darkness, and hence he gets the Witch Elves and that kind of stuff. those were almost going in that direction. And to me, those are the interesting armies out of King. I think restriction breeds creativity, right? And yeah.
Yeah, I'm right with you on that one. So I think finally whether it's people who have just started commenting or Google got over its constipation, we got a bunch of comments now. So we'll answer a couple of these and then go back to the questions. So Dark CT talking about sort of the lack of excitement as it goes on. He says he was very happy when Nagash dropped because he was a fan of Necromancers. But then the realization started to sink in at about Thanquil, that the stuff he was into was getting lit on fire and shoved off the walls. And I think that's exactly what we were talking about, is that something new and exciting is awesome, but if it's constantly just knocking you in the head, eventually you'll get a migraine. And Paul Keenert puts a very important point here that I know nothing of Beastmen, with 1, 2, 3, 4 exclamation points. So thank you, Paul. I appreciate you shoving my lack of knowledge of the Beastmen in my face. And Dark CT also gives us another plus vote for End Time Grudge Bearer.
I'm telling you,
Tuna Sandwich,
make it happen.
It would. You'd get Michael back in the ninth. That's for damn sure. I don't know who he'd play, but. And Tuna Sandwichify tells us to keep talking, that he's painting and listening. So, still trying to get ready for brawlers, eh, Tuna?
Me too.
Yeah, it's. I'm looking forward to it, but we are gonna lose so bad.
Hey! I'm facing Orcs and Goblins the first game. I'm pretty sure he's not packing nothing but undeath, dude.
I don't know, man. I've seen some of those lists now. They're creeping me out. All right. So, second question. Who is this one from? I make the mistake of not actually linking who these questions. Remington Steele gave us our second question.
Oh, awesome.
Excellent. He says, do we think the Glottkin are killed or were they banished? Can you truly kill a demon? I think fluff-wise, as it presents it in the Warhammer book, no, you can't. Because all the demons is sort of like shed skin cells of the 4 Chaos Gods. And so you just, you pop one and they go back to their makers. Now, I will like to talk about this in a bigger term if you guys don't have any other thoughts about it. How big of a waste were the Glottkin, story-wise?
Yeah, I mean, yes. I think it was ultimately the biggest miss of all the End Times books, right? Because it felt like, so here's the easiest thing I can reference. This is going to be a really super nerd reference, but I'm watching my way through Buffy the Vampire Slayer again, and there's like a random episode at the end of season 2, right when everything's building to a head, where suddenly they're solving the mystery of a fish man who's attacking the swim team. Has nothing to do with the larger story. And I'm like, I don't give a crap about this. Why are we talking about this fish man? There's a bigger story going on here. That's Glottkin. Glottkin is just a random fish man thrown in the middle of a bigger plot.
Very eloquently put.
You know what? That makes me like him a little more now. And that's a weakness for me. Like, to be honest, here's another thing. If GW happens to be listening, make me an army of fishmen and I will buy it. Right here, right now, make me an army of fishmen. If you make them in 9th, I will buy it. And I will go to 9th and I will play my fishmen in 9th.
So will the book be called I Am Murdoch?
I could go with Murlocs. I could go with Sahuagin. I could even go with like the dumpy-looking fishmen from the Slayers anime. I mean, Alicia calls them the derp fishmen.
Wrath of Kings has a very nice line of fish people minis.
Do they?
They do, yeah. It just came out, like their most recent Kickstarter that delivered has a very nice line of fishmen minis.
Don't tell me that, 'cause then I'll want to start like a Beastman army of fishmen.
I couldn't tell you what the name of the army is, but I'm sure if you just went and searched like Wrath of Kings Kickstarter.
I'm sure I could go to their website. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Do make them all look like piranhas and do a corn marked army. That'd be awesome. All right, so third, Alicia's saying Sharknado.
Absolutely.
I would have to come up with like one of the big like Beastman monsters and just be it a. Isn't one of them a stone thrower? Which one is it?
It's a Cygor.
Cygor. Do that as a Sharknado. It just hurls sharks out instead of stones.
Yes, please. I want that to happen.
Damn it! I haven't. You guys can't give me these ideas. I haven't finished my lizard men yet.
Hey, sorry. I can't help it. There's a lot of cool minis in the world, and there's never enough money or time for them. That's the problem.
I know.
It's an embarrassment of riches.
Yes.
Yeah. And I can't switch now because I'm just now getting to the part that I'm really interested in about the lizard men. Now that I'm getting like my core done, I'm going to start getting into the big monsters, and that's making me super happy to think about. Okay, so next question, and this is our last one before we'll open the floor up to just general questions. This one's from William Page. And he's talking about the summoning spell in Glottkin. Do we think they did a better job how they structured the points for the summoning spell in Glottkin, or how they did it in the Undead?
I definitely have an answer to that.
You go ahead, because I don't think I do.
Okay, the Lore of Undeath is way better than the Demon Summoning one. And here's why. Because the Demon Summoning one is a one-spell catch-all, right? Like, it just summons anything, basically. Like, there's a hard points limit, and that points limit is ridiculously high for what you can get out of there. And anytime, and like, if I need a flame cannon out of it, I've got a flame cannon. I think that's why it's a scenario. It's basically a scenario special rule as opposed to something that like all combined Chaos armies suddenly get access to. Because it's just like, it's fluffy, it's thematic, it's appropriate. I get it. Demons get summoned, cool, neat. Now that thing can exist if the story is appropriate for it. But it is just hyper ridiculously unbalanced, and it's just not executed as well because it's not 7 spells. Right? If I have the spell, I can get anything, period.
Mm-hmm. Now, I think that spell is kind of interesting if you were to build it into, like, a piece of terrain. And have it just be like, this terrain will randomly, on some roll, spit out a demon. and that kind of adds to a scenario. But yeah, I haven't really seen a whole lot of people throwing down on with the demon spell, and I think you're pretty much dead on why there, Vince.
Yeah, I think in the end it's naturally less balanced, and it's just clearly more of a scenario special thing, which is fine. That's honestly probably where it belongs, and it's good like that. That's okay.
Yeah. You don't have to give the players uber power every time they get a new book.
Yeah. Some things can just be for fun, and I think that's the right answer. So in that regard, perhaps it's actually more successful, right? Because it actually had the light touch implementation. Like, Taken in the Void, purely mechanically, I think it's worse. But when looked at like the greater way it was implemented in the game, it was better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Nobody's breaking U.S. Masters with a demon summoning list.
Very, very good point. So let's see. Tuna Sandwichify is voting up the Realms of Chaos army list system, which I agree with. And it looks like Dark CT is giving a second vote for a fish army. So.
Oh, Fishman. You know, I've seen this pop up, too, on, like, forums and stuff over the time. Mm-hmm. This is a thing I do not get. Fish people are gross. I have no desire to see them on the table. It's not a thing. I would take like the monkey people army before I take the fish people army. If we're just gonna play Beast Wars over here.
But think about the modeling potential of the fish people army. Like you can do them like leaping out of the water like dolphins. It'd be awesome. Like there's a lot of stuff to do, and I like the idea of doing the Cygor as the Sharknado. There's something cool about that.
Sure. So just to cover real quick here, I just feel I need to touch on a point.
Go ahead.
So your problem with in the past with thematic bases was a guy carrying around a rock or something or some piece of tree, but you're perfectly okay with dudes moving a lake around the board that they happen to be modeled on. Like, that is no problem. Totally legit. He brings his own puddle. That's all thumbs up.
Yes.
Fair enough.
See, that's the benefit of being Fluff Master as opposed to the mechanics guy. I don't have to make sense from sentence to sentence. The fluff moves and whirls in uncontrolled ways. So
Awesome.
Very nice.
they're just leaping up from the groundwater. That's what it is. They just dig tunnels.
They
just
they
put
carry buckets with them. You bought to model
Right.
each of them with like a big 8-gallon bucket. Just, good to go.
That would be kind of cool, actually. That would be really funny. Maybe do a couple of them with like mermaid style, where they're just in a glass box full of water that people are pushing.
The unit killer in the middle of like the rank and file horde infantry would be like a big overflowing fountain. Huh?
Yeah.
How about that? There you go. See?
It's not a terrible idea. It just needs some work, some polish. All right, so we got about another 10 minutes before we hit our typical hour and a half. So let's go ahead, since you are normally our biggest question asker, Vince. We give you the floor, sir. Any question, any topic. Let us have it.
Sure. Well, I mean, I think we can stay in topic. That's all right. So, one of the things we asked earlier was about the wanting to see more good guy models. So here's the question I would pose to both of you, since both of you had an army that was either underrepresented or had its teeth kicked in during those first two books.
Mm-hmm.
If you could have had one mini release, one model release, something, what would it have been? One for both of your armies, or any army you play. What would it have been?
The concept of Doom Seekers.
Okay.
They posted something about it in the brew house a while back, and they kind of gave a little quick rundown of mechanics. They basically worked like Fanatics did. So what you did is you had them sitting in a dwarf unit. How in storyline typically dwarves are released, slayers are typically released from units, and they're just whirling around these giant chain axes and just would hurl into lines. And I think the way the mechanics work for them is they died when they hit a enemy unit, but they never bounced through a friendly unit. So like a one-shot hit. That would have been cool to see. Because with the ramp-up of, oh, we're getting beat up, more slayers, it would make sense for us to have more guys pop up and go, hey, we're all slayers now.
Now, are you taking that over some form of like golem construct and over some form of bear cavalry?
Bluff-wise, I have to. Now, if I could have golems riding bears or bear golems, I would be okay with that. Or gyro bear golems.
Why not? Helicopter bear golems. All right, fair enough. No, I think the Doom Seekers is an awesome idea. Yeah.
I think for the ogres, at any rate, I would like to have seen like a big, massive, like new named character on some sort of beast. My original thought was like put a tyrant on some sort of large shaggy beast, but I think like the more I think about it, would be cool is if like the lore of fire had gone into a fire belly, and you have like the fire belly riding some sort of lava creature. Like that would be cool to me.
All right. Yeah, that would. That'd certainly be very different. Are we talking like a big magma monster? Not like necessarily a Kadai destroyer, but like I don't mean that in rules wise. I just mean like size and sort of that kind of a
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, it's something like that. Of course, I mean, in general terms, I always thought it would be like something like this would be a great way to actually bring the Chaos Dwarves sort of under the foot of the ogres, but give them a little bit. See, I guess that's the difference. Like with the ogres away from that sort of construction, gunpowder stuff, I would like to see them go a little farther that way.
Oh, more
So like
mechanical,
ogres
like
with
more.
Chaos Dwarf slaves. Yeah, but have it be obviously where it's all like stolen tech. It's not like they're making their own stuff. They're just raiding other people for stuff. Like you could see like a unit where they like the ogres have obviously like raided the Chaos Dwarves, so that now they're like either with blunderbusses or like those fire glaive things that the Chaos Dwarves have, something like that, where you're seeing that kind of higher level tech being taken and being completely misused because they're still ogres, but something like that could be kind of cool. I could see like your big, like the 50 mil unit that they want to do for the for the equivalent of like the Blight Kings or something, be something like that for the ogres.
So you're saying you're looking for some ogres to be like those like morons out of Next Gen, where they're like they steal Geordie and try to get all the Enterprise technology, and they're like, we are smart. Those guys. That's who. That's who you're trying to. That's what you want to see.
You know, something like that wouldn't necessarily be bad, provided that they were at least mildly successful with it. Like, I wouldn't even mind like the introduction of misfire tables or something, but just make the payoff worth it.
Gotcha. Now, do you take that idea over a Noblar hero?
Over a Noblar hero, not in a million years.
All right. So, if you could have gotten like a Noblar special character riding like a Thunder Tusk or something like that.
Not a, so here's the thing. Not a special character, I don't think. I would much prefer a general option for a Noblar character rather than being sort of stuck into special characters. Because in general, I don't like playing with special characters and I don't really use them. So I think for me it would be much more helpful just to have Noblar generals or whatever you want to call them.
All right, I can deal that. So how about Noblar heroes and their mount choice are your little saber cat, your little redirector guy. Like that's what they get to ride.
I could do that.
I just want a unit of that.
Yeah.
Well, at that point value, dude, don't think for a second I wouldn't be taking units of that.
There's a horde of
needs-
Noblar saber cats.
It's like, who needs Iron Guts? I got Noblar cats.
Absolutely. Noblar cats are a go.
Yeah, and I would actually have to say that every time I attack, like charge with them, and be like, Noblar, Noblar, Noblar cats, ho!
I like it.
Oh, God.
I think we got a time for one or two more questions if you got any in your back pocket there, Vince.
Sure. So if you could have changed, like, here we are at the end of, Archeon, right? And we're a day, basically, from that book coming out, more or less. And so now we're at the end of this story. And here's what I'll ask. If you could have had Games Workshop tell you one piece of information at the start of the story, right, that you know now, what would have been the best thing for them to tell you that would have maybe eased this situation, and what would have been the worst thing you could have learned up front? Does that make sense? What would have been the most helpful Games Workshop communication about their upcoming story, and what would have been the least helpful, or the most destructive, perhaps?
Question to clarify this: does it have to be something that has been demonstrably true up to this point?
You mean like, are they lying to you? Like, is that what you mean,
Well,
or?
more like if I vote for my most safe thing would be that all the armies would exist come ninth edition, that would easily be it. But we don't know if that's going to be true or not.
Yeah, sure.
Um,
Okay, got it. Yes, something that we know to be a fact, or at least mostly know to be a fact from up to the point of Archeon. So nothing including ninth edition, only end time stuff.
I don't know. To be completely honest, and I don't think this is me being just a negative Nancy about it. I don't think there's enough good in this story for them telling me early would have had any effect on my ultimate feelings on it. There are a few good things that are neat, but out of context they don't mean anything. And to be honest, even in context, they're not all that helpful. There's certainly nothing I think that we know up to this point that they could have told me to prevent me from feeling this general malaise about the product.
What if they had said? What if they had come to you and said, Mittierim, I'll tell you what, buddy, we've been watching your show. We really like it. Good job. Good stuff. This is exactly what we want to see. And so we're going to tell you right up front, this is going to be a hell of a ride. It's going to be really dark. I mean, like, super dark. Like, take how dark you're imagining right now at the beginning of Nagash. It's 10 times worse than that. It's so dark. It's like the middle of a hot topic on a goth kid's, like, birthday dark. It's super dark. Uh,
Uh,
do you think them
yeah.
level setting like that at the beginning would have helped?
It would have helped in some way because it would have saved me the money I spent on the other 4 books.
That's fair. I think if I had to pick one, it would be, I would have loved an upfront communication. I think this has borne out to be true, but there's been so much question and hemming and hawing about it, and this is kind of cheating on my original thing. But I would have loved them to say all of these models that we're making right now will still be valid in ninth edition. So not the armies, not everything previous. I just mean like the things we're releasing right now for end times are still going to be valid come ninth edition. I think that would have been a thing that I would have liked to see. Most of our current information says that's the case, so I believe that to be true. But I would have definitely liked to see that up front. And I think it would have helped their sales. Like, there's got to be some number of people who didn't buy this stuff because they were afraid it wasn't going to be valid. And these things did have a fairly hefty price tag.
I could see that. Now, as far as the worst thing that they probably could have told me, yeah, I think if they had just given me some sort of hint of how badly the good races, like how one-sided the whole story would play out. They'd come to me up front and went, you know what? Order has no chance. Absolutely zero. They're done for. You're going to be spending the next 4 books at $75 pop watching a drowned man gasping for air to ultimately die in the water. I would have returned Nagash. But again, that's ultimately what we saw, so maybe it would have been the best thing too, because like I said, it would have saved me the months of grinding my head against a wall about it, and we could have just done our own thing and said, screw that. Still
Sure.
wouldn't have helped their sales much, but I bet I
Michael,
can
what
guess
about
which
you?
one. I bet I can guess which one Michael's worst is. If
Go
they had
ahead.
told him, if they had told him up front how the Dwarf King dies, he'd have set fire to GW.
Yeah, I would have. Just a warning. Quit your shit with the dwarves. Seriously. That's my only
I think
rant.
we're seeing like the beginnings of like a Unabomber style thing.
No, I'm too lazy for it. That's the issue. I'll just
Right.
send them. I'll
So it's
send
all
them
empty
hate mail.
threats.
Yeah, I'll send them hate mail. Just bags and bags of hate mail. Just
So
all
what about
full.
you, Michael? Is there anything that they could have told you to soften the blow?
Yeah, they could have said, the world gets destroyed. No one's alive except for the Chaos Gods. I've been like, all right, well, I'm not gonna read this. That would have been enough. Or at least even if we had bought at that point, I wouldn't have expected anything. It'd be like, yeah, they're beating us, but everybody dies anyways.
So you're saying you would take solace in the nihilism?
I'm a dwarf. As long as the enemy goes down with me, I'm okay with it.
Okay.
We have slayers for this particular reason.
It's a good point. You don't get a death blow rule unless you know you're not too concerned about your own life.
Yep. Everybody else went with us. I'm okay with that.
Yeah. So I'm going to interrupt here. For Remington, actually reminded me of his last paragraph of the End Times rules, which I think is the best thing ever. And I may actually put it on a sticky note and put it inside my copy just for my own well-being. I would like to read it for you all. This takes place right at the end of the spoiled thing. The world has just ended. Okay. So, and then a startled halfling awoke from his winter slumber. He was a little concerned that hibernation meant he had missed the entire End Times events. With a yawn and a push, he opened the oak door of his underground hovel, which opened to the bright lights of the world outside. One overriding thought preoccupied his mind in the wake of the catastrophic happenings that befell mankind. What's for breakfast, then? Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Remington.
Nice. Mr. Steele, you are a gentleman and a scholar, as always.
If they had told me that that was actually the last chapter, or the last paragraph of the End Times book, that might have made it all better. I'm not saying 100%, but there's some serious swing on that particular paragraph, my friend. All right, guys. Well, it has been about an hour and a half. We went a little later this time because we did get a bit of a late start, but hopefully you guys have enjoyed this. We had an awful lot of viewers tonight, more than we did, so we've at least been entertaining. I think that's just it. You mentioned the word end times, and people come flocking to you. Either that, or maybe they just showed up waiting for my inevitable meltdown on camera.
No, they only got brief ones to me.
Happy or sad, I think that this is one thing you must say for the End Times. There is more interest and activity around Warhammer Fantasy right now than there was in many of the years previously before it. Like, for good or bad, it has simply attracted more attention, more players, more interest than anything else. Like, if their stratagem is to attract attention, it worked. I just want to see them keep that momentum alive and not necessarily in a ongoing negative way, like that hopefully they manage to roll it around positively.
Yeah. Well, my only hope is it will avoid the sort of inevitable backlash that a lot of these sort of high attention driving events can cause. And I think you're seeing it a little. I think End Times needs to end now because you're getting a lot of folks. I mean, I belong to a bunch of Facebook groups for Warhammer and stuff like that, and there's a lot of the sort of start of this Jesus, when will it end kind of anger. And it's like, let's not stretch this out too far. You're going to have a kind of ugly backlash on your hands. But
well,
no,
I
agree.
The answer is this Friday.
Yep. Unless you pre-ordered it, and then you won't get it till next Thursday.
True.
Because that's just how it works. But it's all right. We got more things, more other things to deal with this weekend than reading. So
horribly.
Right. So just to let everybody know kind of what's coming on the channel, we did not have a game night this week because we're going to the tournament, to Brawler's Bash, for anybody who has not paid attention and for some reason still found this channel. But I'm planning on, once we get done, I mean, we'll have at least the 5 games of the tournament. We're going down there Friday, so we might like sneak down to the place and get a couple games in Friday depending upon when we get there. So if anybody's interested in that's getting a game in Friday, just let us know. We'll try and make it work. But as far as practice games, I probably won't be, like any of the games Friday night, I probably won't be doing battle reports for that, but I will probably do the 5. Well, I definitely will do the 5 for the tournament unless one of my opponents objects strenuously, but I can't imagine that actually happening. So there will be more battle report content coming. It's been a little light because our games have been getting larger and larger, and it prevents multiple multiple games going on in a single night, but we're hoping that's going to change soon. So that's all for updates. I wanted to thank again Vince for dropping by and filling in as an honorary boy for tonight.
Always happy to, sir. It is an honor and a pleasure, as always.
Absolutely. We love having you. So unless you fellas have anything you would like to add?
Take it easy.
Nope.
Keep it cheesy.
All right.
No, Vince. No,
Okay.
Skaven.
No Skaven jokes. It's still tender, isn't it, Michael?
It's very, very tender.
All right. Well, thank you guys for watching, and we will see you next week, same time. May very well be continuing the end times discussion because it seems popular. So far be it for us not to bend to the will of our viewers. But thank you guys. And again, if you want to get in on a Beastman rebuttal show, leave it in the comments. Be more than happy to do it. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll catch you next week. Bye-bye.